Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode. My name is Hans.
I'm Adrid.
And we are your hosts for now and forevermore. For those of you who tuned in to last week's episode, Giddle 88, you would know that we spoke a lot about gamification and where it's going and what we think about the term and how it could be influencing the future. Now, with that in mind, we actually have a very cool guest who is joining us today, a Mr. David Carpenter, who is the CEO of Gamiotics, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about what he thinks gamification is about and what he thinks is in store for the future of this really incredible topic. David?
Hi, thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
It's always good to have someone. Yeah.
This is an area that I'm literally building a software company around right now. So I'm excited to come in and talk to you guys because it's been such an interesting journey. And I listened to last week's podcast hearing, perspectives outside of my current perspective, because I work in entertainment, hearing how it's starting to find its way into the world in a lot of really interesting ways is just kind of reinforcing this direction that we're going to as people and consumers. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Now,
thank you for joining us.
With that in mind, tell us a little bit more about Gamiotics. So before we get into what we think about all of these things, tell us a bit more about your company and where it began, where the idea for it came from, and what you're doing with it exactly.
So I work in live entertainment. I'm based just outside of New York, but my office is in New York, and I've spent most of my career working in Broadway and off Broadway as in a variety of ways. I mean, as in sales and marketing, in production, and then for the last almost decade now as a producer in New York theater. And I was I've done musicals, I've done plays, I've done a whole bunch of things. And about 6 years ago, I was actually trying to figure out this really specific problem for the live stage, which is like, I'm a big video gamer, big board gamer. We can talk, which we should talk to you about that for a minute. But like, I love games, right? Always have been. And it was always just something like that I did. Like in my social life, in my downtime, right? Like working in theatrical production, New York, working on Broadway is kind of high stress, right? And so coming home and just diving into a video game, something I've been doing since I was 7 years old, right? And so I came across this show, right, about 6 years ago, which I won't name, so I don't work on it anymore. That was the first time I'd ever seen anyone successfully execute this sense of gaming a live story, right, for the stage, right? And what the show was is that it was this rom-com dating show, right? And it was about a guy going on a date with the girl, and the audience got to make all of these choices throughout the course of the evening that impacted what would happen. So not only was there a branching narrative like that was there, right? But then there was also this point system, this game mechanic, right? That was inside the game. So, like for instance, right? And from a branching standpoint, the guy he was led by this genie. I mean, that concept was so weird, right? It was led by this genie, right? Because the genie was going to help him, find love, right? That was going to happen.
Okay.
So
yeah.
the guy, and then the other conceit on top of that was that the genie was helped by his chorus of angels or whatever it was called, right? Which was the audience, right? So that's how they get together, right?
That's cool.
And concept, yeah. So the guy, at this one point in the show, the audience gets to choose which girl he goes on a date with, right? So there were kind of three choices. Now, in retrospect, many years later, I was like, well, God, that's a terrible idea, right? You can't have this guy choosing. I was like, okay, forget it, right? But it was interesting. But then, from that point forward, the choices that the guy made on the date is like, does he say this line? Does he do this thing? Do they do, all these things were then like a point system that led to a different branch, right? So at the end of the show, if the audience had voted really positive, right, for the guy all the way through, they made every single right choice, he sleeps with the girl at the end. right? And if they make every wrong choice for him, he throws himself off a bridge, right? And then there's like 10 other things in between. And so it had like 10 different endings, right?
Okay.
I know, right? And so, you know, I did a presentation of it in New York. We actually did it at Joe's Pub. And God, this must be back in maybe 17, 16, 17.
A while ago, yeah.
It was a while ago, right? But also, like, the 2 years of COVID, it's just entirely scrambled my sense of time, right?
Oh,
so it's
don't
like,
worry. It's the same with all of us.
Mishmash. Yeah.
So the audience, they had invited a lot of industry, a lot of better friends, and everyone's just like, I love this idea. Like, I love this idea. I love this idea of having agency within the experience that we're having, right? They didn't like the show very much, right? They're like, well, you got some problems with that show, right? But they loved the concept. And I was like, and I, you know, obviously I did too. So it was this thing of being like something that I knew I really liked, right? I saw other people like, right? So like you know, you're a producer in entertainment. It's like you can like the weirdest, strangest stuff, but like kind of doesn't matter sometimes if nobody else likes what you like, right? Like sometimes or it takes long for you to come. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, right?
Sometimes.
Well, like commercial entertainment. I mean, I have a commercial movie. But there was one really big problem, right? So the way that the voting mechanism, it was all polling, right? The way the voting mechanism worked was that it was just off-the-shelf educational polling software, right? Anything that a teacher could put into a classroom, right? And then the audience was handed remotes, four button push remotes, ABCD remotes, the radio frequency, right? That they were handed when they walked in the theater. And like that isn't a scalable concept, right? Like there's too much that can go wrong. And then the software itself only lent itself to polling, right? So like what I saw and what we originally worked on was this concept of and what I realized is what I was really after was this concept of agency in a live experience. Like that collectively the audience is making a decision about how this thing is going.
So
right?
more of interaction versus just a simple voting system. You actually really wanted the audiences to have a direct impact on what's going on. So instead of like a game show, an actual like legitimate difference in what actually happened.
There were stakes, right? And there were decisions that the audience, right? And so because the way that it worked was, you know, like in a polling situation, it's most votes win, right?
Yes.
And so what was interesting is seeing half the audience wanting this and half the audience wanting something else, right? And seeing how this thing started moving through. And those days, and you know, it's still a journey going. It's a fascinating psychological experiment, right? Along inside the entertainment about the hows and the whys. But I can come back to that later. There's a lot more on that later, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more on that later, right? So what I started working on the show, and I immediately was like, look, the single biggest problem, right? Like, you know, as an entertainment producer that I'm fighting right now is that the software isn't like you're at the end of what this software can do. Like it's been designed to do anything.
It's limited.
Yeah.
Right? Also, you cannot hand something to an audience when they walk in a door, right? Like that in order to enjoy the experience. Like part of the thing about live entertainment is that, especially, and when I say live entertainment, I mean in-person entertainment, right? Is that it is enough to get them to buy a ticket, right? The amount of money and effort and everything that you do is simply to get them to buy a ticket, right? Because once they have done that value exchange, they'll get to the venue, right? Like you don't you're like, right? But just to get them to give you their money to buy a ticket is like, it's really, really hard. So it's like when you're adding on pain points on top of that, and I've seen this many, many, many times, you are creating problems rather than solving, right? So I said, look, this can't work this way. We've got to find a better solution. And of course, like this is back in 2016. And so it's like, well, then we need to create an app. And I was like, do we, first off, apps are expensive, right? Right. But like, do we really need to create an app? I think that is actually introducing more pain points to the consumer experience. Because like in those initial conversations, so actually what happened was that through a lucky series of events, right? I got connected with a programmer out, a software engineer and technologist out of California, with this guy by the name of Dave Keene. Dave at that point was working at a healthcare. It was a CTO of a healthcare startup, right? But in his career, he had been the senior architect of the PlayStation gaming network, right? Okay. And of course, he was a huge theater lover, right? And so and so I took him this problem and I said, I have this experience that I'm doing. I love this idea of audience interaction. I need to make this painless for the audience. So Dave said, well, what about an app? And I said, I said, the problem with an app is that if it's 8:05 and the audience member is late and it's raining and they're angry and something terrible happened at dinner and they get to the theater and the usher says, you have to download an app in order to enjoy the experience. You're like, no.
You're not going to know, yeah.
Because then you have to like download it and log it, and I said this back in 2016. And I think now, right, what we see is an enormous amount of app resistance that's happening in the marketplace, right? There was this promise by Steve Jobs that apps were going to solve everything for us on our phone, and then you have other technology companies that I will remain nameless if any of them are sponsors or advertising partners, that have come in and upended the idea of what that app does to and for you, right? And so you're now seeing this movement in people saying, well, I don't want to download any apps, right? So I said this in 2016, but like, I don't want to download apps. I hate apps on my phone, right? Like I have the ones that I need and that's it.
Yeah.
And then,
I get that. Fully.
In live entertainment, you have to view as a single shot experience, right? Like that. And that's also one of the resistances in the app thing is like, why am I going to download an app for something I'm only going to do once, right? You download apps
precisely.
that are right.
Precisely.
So that was pillar number one. And Dave said, okay, let's make it web-based, right? Let's just make this entirely web-based, right? And then it will be easier to work, and then that actually solved an enormous amount of problems right out of the gate, right? Because suddenly you're not beholden to iOS or Android, right? In terms of their software updates. You don't have to have a team of engineers who are constantly updating things. And you're not asking anything out of the consumer other than log onto a website, right? That's it, right?
Quick and easy.
So that original show I ditched. Suffice it to say that I gave a bunch of notes to the author and the author didn't take any of the notes. And as a producer, when you're in that situation with a creator and they're not taking your notes, it's like, well, then you need to find someone who you'll listen to, right?
Out of curiosity, without divulging too much, what were some of the notes that you made? Because when you're talking to me about a theatrical production, my understanding is that they're already very difficult to put together. So if you have to have different segmenting pathways, which are all reliant on the audience. So okay.
No. We will get to that, right? Because now I go on a 2.5-year journey where all of these problems came, right? So I mean, the notes that were actually, honestly, it was a content thing. It was like, you can't have in this day and age a man ask and this audience choose a woman for him. This has roots in misogyny, right? The characters, like at that time, the lead character, was described as a loser, right? And I'm like, well, no one wants a loser as a hero. You have to go on a redemption arc that he never really did, right? So I'll get to some of the other problems.
Well, when you mentioned that the best outcome was basically having sex and the worst outcome was suicide, I was a bit like, that's a little bit extreme.
It sounds like the classic legal novel.
Again, a lot of notes that didn't get taken. So fine. So I'm very fortunate in my career is I produced a show in New York called Puffs. And Puffs is a parody of the Harry Potter universe. And it was a massively successful show. Still is to this day. It ran 3 years in New York. It broke every box office record at the theater that I was in. And now it's one of the top 10 most licensed shows in the US. Like, it is just a juggernaut of a show.
And you also toured Australia with it? The same one?
Yeah, we did Australia with it
as
well. It's still, and now it's in licensing land. So there are productions of Australia happening there. There are projects everywhere in the US. There are no productions in the UK because their parody laws work differently. And I'll get the pantsuit off of me. But Puffs was really great, and Puffs was an important part of what this gamification journey was too, because I started actually working with the team on Puffs on this idea. And one of the other pillars, so at this point, like the software is named something, but we built a working version of Gamiotics, and so I commissioned this new show from my team at Puffs, and said, all right, let's start working on this, and what they created was an American style Western that was super fun. that was using Gamiotics for its audience engagement tool. So the way that it worked back then, and this is like back in 17, is that the audience would come in, they'd log onto a website and they'd enter a code, right? And then from that point forward, I'd established via their phone a two-way communication device between the audience and the content, right? And Gamiotics had in those early days a couple of different outputs, right? So I'll give you some language about how we describe it, right? Is that it's sitting on a server, right? So it's sitting on the software sitting on an AWS server, right? I log in, my IP address on my phone is now communicating with that server back and forth, right? That server is also able to manage many simultaneous connections all at the same time, right? So what I do is then I say, and it's early, again, started in polling, right? So it said, all right, audience, when they come into this theater, because we did this run at the University of Florida for about 5 performances, and to start testing these things out, we said, all right, what color do you want the lights, right? And so we would send the question to the phone, called an election. It would show up immediately on their phone, right? They would choose, they'd push it, and you'd have that animation of the button pushing. And then that data would be sent back to the server, and then the server would then send that out via a projector, right? So there's a performance output. So on the screen in front of the audience, you have this polling happening, right? That says, what color want the lights, red, green, or blue? The answer would hit, red, and then the board op would change all the lights to red, and the audience would go, "Oh my god!" Right? And so, like, that was another revelatory moment in the building of what Gamiotics is because what we saw is real-time interaction between the audience and content, and then their choices reflected immediately on stage. And so, in doing so, we established trust, right? That what they were participating in was truthful to the experience that they were having. And in those early days, everyone was always like, you're faking all the votes and none of this is real. And we're like, no, it's real. You just chose what color to change the lights. We didn't fake that. You all voted, right? And because they could see it, because so as we started looking at it, we said, all right, we've got to design this in the live entertainment spectrum. And so we built we built a timer on our elections so that you could say, all right, for the minute we hit send the election to the phone and it pops up on the phone, the audience has 8 seconds to vote. And I think it's some way and we can set, that's a variable we can set, right? Let's say 8 seconds to vote. And the reason why we built elections to run only 8 to 10 seconds is because that was the length of a scenic scene change, traditionally, right? If you go to a musical on Broadway, it takes 8 to 10 seconds because for hundreds of years, we have established that when you're looking at a stage, that's how much time you can distract the audience so they don't get bored, right? So we just took that concept.
Makes sense.
So the beauty thing about the architecture that Dave team built is that we built it to be fast and work in real time so that there was no lag between the voting or the action and what the audience saw reflected on display. So the data that's all going back and forth between these points is infinitesimal, right? We are dealing in microseconds here, right? And so when I looked at, and we always look at the landscape, that's one of the things that no one else really thought of, which is you have to unify that entire audience on one server, keep the data limit extremely low, and make it as seamless as possible so that there's no interruption to the entertainment. Because in the early days, as I was pitching this idea, there was this kind of resistance, and there still is to a degree, of technology within the live space because tech never works, right? And so for the last couple of years, whenever I show this, and the first thing that people say was like, "Oh my God, your tech works," and I'm like, "Yeah, we designed it to work." Okay, but I realized it was like, okay, we actually designed it very smartly to work.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's built on AWS, right? Is that because you want to potentially expand it on a global scale?
Well, so without going, yes, I mean obviously, but without getting too technical, it's like if I have, and I've done this before, if I have audiences that are in different parts of the world, right? If I have large audiences that are in different parts of the world simultaneously having an experience together, you're going to need to put an AWS server close to where that audience is, right? If it's a large amount of people. But it's also kind of a scalability question. So like, we're talking in the early days of like hundreds of people. One of the reasons with AWS that is beneficial is like, if I need to spin up 4 or 5 different servers to manage an event of 5,000 people, that's really efficient for us to be able to do, right?
Look,
that is possible.
I ask because so I've obviously done a lot of like reading about what your company does and the different stage productions that are using your technology. And as somebody who loves tech, I mean, and we've spoken about gamification before in this podcast. We always speak about these things. I would love for this to come here, and that's why when you were like, "Oh, it's AWS," I was like, "Oh, well, that's brilliant,"
exactly.
because it means that if you needed to deploy it in different nodes around the world, like South Africa, the possibility exists that it could happen.
Yeah, because like right now our server's sitting somewhere in California, we think, right? But yeah, it's like when you start moving these experiences around. So let's get back into that, right? Because like, yes, I want to come to South Africa with it, right? The challenge on that show, that Western show that I was working on, was that because this technology is so new, and we see this a lot of times, is that the technology became a gimmick instead of a tool, right? Within the telling of the story. And that was major problem number one that I couldn't get around, right? Major problem number two is that in the way that story was constructed, the audience's role was to make choices for the protagonist, right? All throughout the telling of the story. And this all harkens back to, honest to God, choose your own adventure books, right?
Yeah.
And early Sierra gaming, right?
Yeah.
That's I mean, the basis of all of this is coming from It's coming from those two places because that's what I grew up with. I mean, that's what I mean, like King's Quest and
actually we wanted to ask you
Quest for
what
Glory
were there we go. You basically answered it, but what were the fundamental games that sort of inspired your choice to do what you're doing? So you've mentioned King's Quest now. Is there anything else?
Because it was a beautiful story. Roberta Williams wrote a gorgeous story about a family that was multi-generational, that all had all the it was just like it was amazing. What ended up being 9 of them, is that right? Like all the way through.
There's a lot.
It was huge.
So that one from telling this story that you had this puzzle that you have to unlock, right? I played all of them from the beginning, right?
Oh, brilliant.
To in those early days, which was the Quest for Glory, but also by Sierra, where you get to choose a class, and then your class has different puzzles. So I play as the fighter, I play as the mage, I play as the thief across the 4 or 5 games that they did, and go back and play them again and again and again, right? And so this concept of replayability in experience was burned into my mind as a child, right? And it's the same thing with the Choose Your Adventure books. I mean, that was pre-video gaming. It's like reading these Choose Your Adventure books and over again just to find the different endings, right?
So
that's where this all comes from. That's it. Like, that's where this all stems from, right? So
it's cool, though. It's love it.
So what happens when you, as an audience, are making all of the choices for the protagonist? It means your protagonist has no character arc, right? And it was a major flaw in the story that we couldn't get around because you couldn't care about the lead character. You just had no stakes by the end of the show whatsoever. And it was just fascinating to watch, right? And it was like at that point, Puffs had become very successful. I was on to producing a Broadway show called Slava Snow Show. And it was just like, this isn't working. I've spent a lot of money trying to make this work, and it's not. I'm like, all right, we're gonna put this aside to a sec, right? So then I went in, and at the end of 19, I don't know if you know Slavas. I don't know if it's ever down there. Slavas is a gorgeous production that's been touring the world for about 30 years.
Wow.
Slava Pulinin is a master clown in his own right, but it's a big experiential show, right? The end of the show, the entire audience is enveloped in a 3 million piece paper snowstorm, right? That's blown out.
That's amazing.
It's gorgeous. Oh, it's a beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. I did it on Broadway for 8 weeks, and it was amazing. And then went through some professional issues, breakups with my former business partner during the course of that time. A lot of stuff kind of happened. But the end result is I'm sitting there, at a bar with my lawyer, and we're going through this terrible divorce, and it's awful. And she's just like, you don't have to work in live entertainment anymore. I can get you a job at Netflix or Lionsgate. It's like I can find you. There's a pathway out of this for you. And I was just like, I never got Gamiotics right. I was like, I never got this thing right. I never actually figured out. I know that the potential is there. I want to give it one last shot. So in January 20, new company, had consolidated control of all the old companies, figured out all the legal problems, and then I was in control of Gamiotics and the software. Like my former partners on that all went away. Dave King's still, a founding member of the company, but everybody else who was involved in those early days is all gone. I said, all right, let's start over, right? So I started over. I commissioned a new show. I started booking I got a venue at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I was raising money. I was like, all right, we're going to do this. And then the pandemic hit and everything fell apart in 2 weeks. I mean, just like everything. Show went gone with my money. Yeah. Edinburgh went gone, right? And so I'm sitting there, I was in this room where we are right now, staring at that wall behind me. And I'm like, well, now what the do I do with my life? Like, now what? There is no live entertainment. So we've looked back, and it turns out I didn't really stare at the wall for very long. I marched downstairs. I said to my husband, I was like, get on your computer. We're going to start writing shows, and we're going to start using Gamiotics. Because my idea is that there is no live entertainment out there. All we got is Zoom. Since the software works for anyone in the world, let's just start doing it. And so that's what we started doing in March of 2020, almost immediately, right? Okay. So there are two important things, is that I produced 20-hour-long shows, almost all of them were an hour-long shows, in 18 months on Zoom as a platform. Wow. Right? Wow. I built a team. I had a writer's room. I had designers. I mean, it was insane what we did. And basically what it was for during the shutdown, during the live entertainment shutdown, I was trying to figure out how to use case Gamiotics across every idea I could think of. And I literally would sit in bed and say, all right, over the next 3 weeks, I want to do a murder mystery. Let's figure out how we do a murder mystery. And I go back to and I'd write, and like it grew over time, but I'd go back to the writers and be like, this is the story we're doing this month. This is what we're doing with this. This is how I wanted to run. This is what we're doing. And then we started building these things, right? Yeah. And what the pandemic for me is actually taught me what Gamiotics was at that point, right? And then I realized that what I had was a two-way communication device between audience and content that was a platform that could serve to help build interactive experiences within live entertainment, right? And so that's what I did for about 18 months. And that's truly where Gamiotics was born, because then we started adding to the software package. We started building more tools, because we'd have these writers meetings, and the writers would say, well, I needed to do this, this, and this. And I'd go back to the engineers and I'd say, well, we needed to do this, this, and this. They're like, okay. And then they build it, right? And that just kept happening over and over again. And so the software then really moved out of prototype into MVP, into minimum viable product at that point, right? About a year ago, the name of that production company was called Seize the Show. And I will tell you this, I hated producing on Zoom. It was so awful. I can imagine. It was so we built an audience of people around the world. I had audiences in Australia, to the UK, all coming in at the same time. Because what it was is it was a real-time show. You do this. My favorite thing about the murder mysteries is that we would do a narrative map, and then we do a gaming map, and we build in all these choices. And there would be a set of choices at the beginning of the show that determined which the murderer was going to be that show, right? So any of the actresses could then be the murderer, and they never knew it was going to be, because it all depended on this weird random choice, right? That the audience would choose. And then you are going down a track, right, from that point forward, right? And so the shows were built in Google Docs that linked, right? So that depending on the it was insane. It was a special kind of hell, right? Because everybody is reading this Google Doc, clicking on the links of the thing the audience is voting on, and hoping that you're going to the right place in the script, right? I literally I've never produced anything so insane, but everybody was like, "This is so fun," right? And the audience was like, "This is so fun," right? So what came out of that was kind of the beginning pillars of what Gamiotics is as a software company, right? And out of those experiences that we built, we realized is that kind of the main thing with Gamiotics is that what it can do is provide authenticity of experience through agency. That if you as a consumer get to choose the thing that happens next, it becomes a more truthful experience. It becomes a more valuable experience to you as a consumer, right?
That's and then actually, of course, it's super relevant, because if you look at a lot of let's take just video games in general, especially games that focus on single player narratives, they have generally the more engrossing ones that have the, where people just can't get enough of them. They have these choices along the way
Little
that
elements,
really immerse the player in the experience, and therefore it becomes
Yep.
somewhat unforgettable. And it sounds like by doing that, in using Gamiotics in a production, you're actually giving the audience that gaming experience, that following that
That's
arc and that
100%
narrative.
right.
And yeah.
Well, it's taking a lot of what makes video games so enthralling to the single user, right? And saying, let's do that same enthralling thing, but for a whole audience of people, right? It's that exact same idea. I think the greatest example, of course, of where this all went wrong was Mass Effect, right? Because it didn't matter. Your choices didn't matter at the end of this 3-game triple A.
That's so true.
Oh yeah, so I know, right? And of course, like that came out right before the pandemic, or right?
Yeah.
The remastered editions, right?
Yeah, right.
No, that was last year. It was actually funny when you mentioned the choose the color of the lights earlier. I immediately thought of the ending of Mass Effect 3. It's just choose your own color, and that's it.
That's it, right? But it has no effect on the story, right? So there's a show in New York, a really super popular show. It's been running for about 10 years, called Sleep No More. Have you ever heard of Sleep No More?
No.
Sleep No More. It takes place in Manhattan. It's in this 5-story building, right? And it's by the guy Punch Drunk. The guys out of London. Punch Drunk was a very famous immersive theater company, right?
Yeah.
And they created this experience that you as a consumer go in. Everyone's wearing a mask, right? And it's basically a nonverbal retelling of Macbeth, right? Because there's no lines in the show.
Okay.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
But it's a 6-hour-long experience, right? Total, and it's 2-3-hour shows, right? So it's like it starts, runs for 3 hours, and then restarts and runs for 3 hours, right? Like that's their day, right? So as an audience member, you are randomly inserted. So you could go in at hour 1, hour 2, hour 5, somewhere in between, right? And so you come into this experience that's already happening around you. And then
that's cool.
It's really cool, right?
That's
you have
very
this 5-story.
That's very different.
You as an audience member get to choose where you go in that building, which actor to follow, because the actors are all running and moving and things, and you are chasing people through this thing. It really is truly an extraordinary thing, right? But no choice that you make as an audience member affects the content. It's always the same. There's nothing that you do, right?
So is that more of like a LARP, live action role playing thing? Because it's
kind of a little bit. I think they'd be pretty pissed if anyone ever described them.
No, but that's what it sounds like. Like it's this thing that happens, and you just sort of slot in, and you kind of come and go. Whereas
and that's it.
What you're speaking about is actually having what feels like a tangible, tangible effect on what's going on.
But that's the I think that I always want to look at Sleep Generation as Sleep No More as the first generation of this idea of audience agency in their experience, that they get to make these choices, right? What I'm doing, what Gamiotics is doing, it's certainly certainly in the live entertainment space, is saying, but what if your choices then change the story?
Yes.
Right? Like, what if you're actually participating in the direction the story's going? And that's what we did at Seize the Show for 18 months, was that their choices then determined, which pathway they went down to which ending they got. And it's always just there's got to be 5 different endings, right? Right? And it can't be Sleep with a Girl first over the bridge. It can't be that, right?
Yeah.
But we did this beautiful show called Saving Wonderland that was about what happened if Alice revisited Wonderland, but her previous pass through it in the Lewis Carroll books, she broke Wonderland. And so she comes back into a broken Wonderland. That's cool. And the goal and this was a big breakthrough for us, because the goal for the audience that we created is we built in this game mechanic that if they solved puzzles and they answered questions correctly as an audience, they would get rewarded with a gear. And depending on how many gears they had as an audience by the time they hit the end of the show, determined how they saved Wonderland. Whether they always saved Wonderland in some way, shape, or form, right? But
that's very cool.
It was beautiful, right?
So I love that, because it initially starts off as you're there, and you're now participating, and you feel it's just you. but then you've brought in a community element to it as well, right? I dig that. I think that's
well, what would happen over
that's something
Zoom
that games don't have. You know that, right? And
Right.
so a lot of single player narrative games are exactly that. They're single player narratives. It's you play the story, and you actually don't share it with anyone. Sure, some games have statistics along the way saying, oh, you picked this choice, but like 80% of other people pick this choice, but it's not interactive enough in like what you're actually doing. So like you're having that live interaction of people being able to immediately influence the outcome in this experience, and I love that. And I love the fact that there's also community element, so this way people are incentivized to actually solve the puzzles, get the gears, and then
they have stakes, they have a voice, right? And so the community thing, that was another great revelation. Is like, so we're doing this over Zoom, right? So the chat on Zoom was like lit all the time. I mean, you'd have people saying, no, choose this, no, do this, and then they'd start commenting on the actors, like, and you had all these people who were like talking like virtually during the course of the show about the show as it's happening, right? And it was just like, and of course we got fans and people start getting invested in our actors. It's always so funny when you'd have people who were like, well, I saw this actor do this show that back then, and it just became this lovely community of people who just loved having this interactive experience, right?
So the show actually took place over Zoom?
It was live. I had actors all over the country, right? We were all scattered all over the place because again, it was a pandemic. Like half the people had moved home. Some people were still in New York. I'm just outside of New York. My husband was the MC for it, so I'm in the attic. He's downstairs, so there was a sound barrier, right? Like it was crazy, right? Yeah. And so we would like do timed showtime. We sold tickets. We charged people to come in, right? And they'd buy a ticket and they'd come in, and then it was done through the webinar. So the only thing everybody would see were the actors, right?
That's brilliant.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Actors, right? Who are trained stage actors, who are all amazing people. It's like, well, here's a new skill set. You have to learn how to turn off your camera when you're not on stage. So when you exit, you exit, right? like you turn your camera. I mean, like, and so just like we went through a lot of that. I mean, like Zoom is a great teleconferencing platform. It's not a broadcast platform, right? I mean, like we really ran into the limit of what Zoom could do by the end of that time period, right? So one of the things that we did is that we filmed all of Saving Wonderland, right? And turned it into a movie, if you will, right? So that we could not have to do it live anymore, except with an operator who's running Gamiotics and playing the correct video packets, right? So we did that. And about that point, I shut down Seize the Show. It was a year ago. Things were opening back up. I was just tired of this. And also, so the neat thing that happened on Gamiotics is that we developed the ability to send rich media because we built this escape room, right? Online escape room called Rubik's Control. And so, and this was inspired by this thing that these guys in London had did. And so we started building our own thing, right? And so we'd be sending stuff to the phone, right? And the audience would have to be solving puzzles. And I would say 80% worked, right? And I'm saying everything like worked, but it's like as an experience, it's like it got to 80% because it was kind of a weird thing, right? But one of the things that we developed was the ability to send a hyperlink to a phone and have the audience click on it because we wanted them to send them to a website to get information, to come back into the chat and solve the puzzle and all that stuff, right? Well, what happened then was that we had been doing post-event marketing surveys and emailing after the show saying, hey, thanks for coming, and get like a 5% response rate. How'd we do? At the end of Rubik's, we said, hey, thanks for coming. We're sending a survey link to your phone right now. Fill it out before we go. And my response rate went to 80% immediately, right? Okay. And that's when I was like, oh, I have something else entirely. Right? Like I have something else entirely than what I thought I did before, because that going from a 5% to an 80% response rate on a survey link, a very deeply powerful thing in the world. So that was just like, I'm going to stop and I'm going to focus on the software company entirely and really figure out what this software company can be. Right. So I want to talk about 20-Sided Tavern in 1 second, but I was to kind of finish the loop on like where Gamiotics is going, because 20-Sided Tavern is super, super exciting. Right.
We're quite keen to speak about that as well.
I know we got time to talk about this, right? So, what Gamiotics can do, right, is that it can deliver an experience to the phone. And what I'm seed funded now, which is great, right? Like as a startup, I went through the hell of an angel round and got and have an investor who we come to terms, we're in agreement. I'm getting funded, but like it's just like it's all like like probably 30 days away from it being signed, sealed, delivered, right? But I'm it's someone that I know very well, and like it's all going very well, right? Because the thing that I actually want to build is the idea, and this ties into the gamification of and I am in the process of building this right now, of like, instead of going to a museum and renting an audio guided tour and having a linear experience, right? What if it was on your phone? There's there's nothing for you to rent, right? You can listen, or you can get interactors. I can send you audio files are going, and instead you're engaged in a two-way conversation with the museum, a two-way conversation with the museum, and the choices you're making determine the experience that you're having. So you go to the Met, and instead of and you go on an adventure, right? Yeah. And that adventure takes you to places that you'd never discovered before.
You see, right? now that I love. So I know we've spoken a lot about what Gamiotics is and where it's going, and where you started, but I absolutely love how you've just mentioned a legitimate practical application in the real world to change an already available experience to make it more enriched, and I love that. I absolutely love that.
Just enhance it.
I mean, I can already imagine going like on a Jurassic Park tour, like go to a thing, and then all of a sudden you have this like, this.
But it's a practical two-way communication device for an arena and a place, an amusement park or something, right? And it does the gamification. Like, I do have a leaderboard built into it. I can do game shows, I can do quiz shows, I can do all these things, right? Where we can gamify. And again, it really comes down to what I want to do is I want to gamify the experience, right? Yes. But I also want to tell branching narrative stories, right? And so kind of going back to what I did over the pandemic was I took this software that had been gamificized, right? I learned how to use it properly, right? Thoroughly how to use it properly, right? And I developed it into a tool. And the thing that I tell people right now is that your phone is not a phone anymore. We should stop calling it a phone. Like, I know it's the iPhone or the whatever. Stop calling it a phone. What it is that it's a tool that unlocks your lives around you. Use it as such. Yeah, right? Pretty much. So I always say, it's like, I can control the temperature in my house from anywhere in the world, because that's what this device can do. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm taking this tool that we already have in our pockets, and I'm using it to unlock experiences for people in the world. And the software is just a platform to build gamification of experience on. And that's what the company is after. Authenticity and agency, but the gamification of experience. And that's what's super important to me. And I think there's a wide open world for that right now.
Yes. So what is most interesting about everything that you've actually spoken about thus far, and how your version of incorporating gamification elements into entertainment media to make it more interactive, and how it works. So one of the few things that immediately comes to mind is kind of what Netflix has been trying to do, with the choose your own adventure story. But, when I think about your tech and what you're doing at the moment, I know that technically it's geared towards live experiences, right? So as it's happening, you want to have that immediate back and forth. But I assume you could also have it for traditional media, right? Where Netflix has all of the possible outcomes linked to a server, but then you as a watcher, you could then like solve puzzles. In other words, have like a one-on-one with just you as you're watching. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. And I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear it. My dog is barking in the background.
Don't worry.
Okay.
It's not that bad.
Okay.
Normally, Edward's dogs are there that are doing it, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing with Netflix is that I think they're just starting to figure out how to get through the gimmick phase, right? I'm way ahead, right?
This is the thing. I kind of, because I can already see the potential of what your tech can do, and I'm already like, damn, I want this. Can't Netflix just like scoop you up and just like immediately implement it, so that I can have this awesome two-way experience with my family while we're watching whatever it is, and then getting an outcome that's not just a simple A or B,
So it's coming, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's all coming, right? And my basis is in live entertainment, right? Like that's where I'm coming from. So I'm starting in the live entertainment space, but with the ambition that we're able to move this on. So let's talk about 20-sided tavern for a second, right? Okay. So 20 what started, well, it started at a couple of different places, right? Is that my partner, so 20 Side Tavern is actually a separate company from Gamiotics, right? It's it's a different company, right? My partners in, we call it Session Zero LLC, but in 20 Side Tavern are a story master and a game master, right? All of whom have worked for Gamiotics. So it's just weird companies, right? Gamiotics is a partner in this company, right? So what I realized is that I built a Nintendo. I need to build a Super Mario Brothers to go along with it for people to understand this. It's like, hey, here's we've seen this happen in VR, right? Which is everybody rushed into building the hardware and didn't build the content, and now they're stuck in this place right now, being like, we have a marketplace full of hardware but not enough content, and we forgot about the consumer along the way. Like VR drives me nuts in terms of how they did it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm actually just following a better playbook, which is like, all right, I built this, I'm working on it, we're working through the software. It's a hard adoption of the software because no one gets it. Like you guys get it, but like no one, it's harder in the wider world. So I'm just building a commercially successful product that is powered by Gamiotics, right? And so what 20 Side Tavern has started, my friend David Andrew Laws was thinking about, how do I build a Dungeons and Dragons style live stage experience, right? And this was pre-pandemic. And then during Seize the Show, we said, why don't we build one online, right, on our Zoom shows and see what happens. The audiences loved it, right? It was just like, we got like a totally different audience than we normally did. And we're like, all right, this is interesting. So when I sat down to Seize the Show, I said, let's keep working on this one thing, right? So we took Saving Wonderland as a film to the Philly Fringe Festival and put it up, and it was a disaster, right? Like everyone was like, I don't get this, I don't like this, right? It was so successful online, and what we realized is that we built it for the Zoom medium. That thing would have to be entirely rebuilt for a film. It was like, this just doesn't work, right? But in the meantime, we said, okay, we have this theater for a week. Why don't we just do a couple of shows of this D&D style thing, right? And then 20 Side Tavern. And honest to God, people showed up out of nowhere in their gaming groups, and it was us, a box of props, and a couple of folding tables, right? And the concept was just like, you had a game master reading a branching narrative story, there a tavern keeper who's running Gamiotics, and 3 players on stage, a fighter, mage, and a rogue, and we put this rudimentary thing up on stage, and people lost their minds for it immediately, right? I realized, like right at that moment, that this fandom, right, this nerddom, this gaming fandom, the who I consider myself, even though I'm a theater guy as well, right? There is no live entertainment that's being served to these people. They have movies, they have comic books, podcasts, they have television shows. They have nothing in the live entertainment space that actually speaks to them. And the way, and when I say actually speaks to them, it's saying, hey, gamers, I'm going to deliver you a show that you can game, right? That you're using Gamiotics to have stakes, to have agency, to have influence, to play, to interact. And so, and it just like out of the gate, right? So what 20 Side Tavern is actually just a stack of IP, right? That's what the company is. It's like you have Gamiotics as a software engine. Think of like Intel Inside, right? That's what it's meant to be. It's like it's powering the audience interaction, right? But then you have a branching narrative story map. Then you have a game map about all the 37 different variables and counting that interact with the story, right? And then a projection map on top of that, which I'll talk in a second, that are all working together to deliver an experience, right? So it's not a play. It's not theater even, right? It is like experiential.
No, it's a whole new experience. Yeah.
It's new.
We did we did 4 showings of it in New York last fall, and then we did because we're trying to do everything in between COVID. That's how everyone's just plotting these days. Like, when's the next wave, right? And then we did a week in, and this is the basement of a theater, like tiny 150 seat space. We did a week in February, and all I did for that week in February, right, was spend $2,000 on Facebook advertising to people who like D&D or affiliated things, and I sold out, like without even blinking. And I was like, well, that's telling me something pretty interesting. So what 20 Sided Tavern is that it is. Do you guys know Immersive Van Gogh? Do you know this thing? Has this come through yet? Right, Immersive Van Gogh is basically.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's basically a giant projected immersive Van Gogh where you walk through. Like, it's all Van Gogh but projected, right?
Big experience.
It's a big experience, right? And I said, what if we do that but make it an interactive game? And so what we built, what 20 Sided Tavern is billing itself to be, is like this big projected experience for the audience, right? And the projections have to follow wherever the story happens to be going, right? But it's interactive. So the first thing that happens in 20 Star Tavern is the audience, and this is a very unique feature to Gamiotics, is that we have the system inside of Gamiotics called the cohort feature. And what the cohort feature does is that it allows me, if I have an A and a B choice, everyone who chooses A, I can then send an election just to those people. And everybody who chooses B, I can just send an election just to those people, so that you can rebalance power and stakes depending on your choice. Right? And then if there's a CD choice and an EF choice, I can combine C and F and like whatever combination you can possibly think of, right? So that, you could, and this isn't what 20 Star Tavern is, but you could literally build an experience of where you're making choices, and by the end, only these people get to choose this, these people get to choose that, that one person chooses that, right? And they're digging out. And I built that. And this must have been a very dark time in my life, but I really wanted to do the Hunger Games experience, right?
Oh, that sounds so good. That sounds really good.
I know, but it's so dark, right? Like the audience is assigned to a district, right? And then they have to fight it out. I was like, oh God, what was I thinking? But that's why the cohort system got built, right? So in our show, you come in, you're handed a die, a six-sided die, red, green, or blue, right? And we'll go back to primary colors every time, right? And that the very first thing the audience chooses is saying, what color die were you handed? Because we randomized it, right? And that's how the audience is then sorted into fighter, major, rogue, right? So when we have moments in the show where we're in a battle sequence, right? And the fighter will say, all right, what do you guys want me to do, fighters? Do I do this spell? Do I take this action or this action? The audience votes, right? They choose, right? And only the fighters get to choose that. So it's really cool that you're able to do that, right?
Cool.
But then we also like they're rolling die. We have dice cams. You're seeing how the things are playing out in real life, and then the projections are following where we're going. So, and then we built it as a dynamic story experience so that in a show, if you go to the apothecary, it sets the treasury on fire, and there's a consequence that happens to that, right? But if in a different night, if you go to the treasury and a demon released as an apothecary, you get a different outcome than before, right? So it's a change. Yeah. So while it is a large branching narrative scripted world, right? There is a lot of improv that exists in terms of the actors having to play with it, but the story it changes every single show.
Replayability, right? So in other words,
that's the replayability part.
Yeah, you could go back because generally speaking, for normal live entertainment, it's a once and done. That's it. But you're actually offering
one and done is a phenomenon, right? A lot of people have this problem of saying one and done, and I'm like, I've solved that.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So what ended up happening? So we did this show in Pittsburgh, right? I have a really good relationship with this theater company in Pittsburgh, and I was talking to them in the fall, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing." They're like, "How soon can you come in?" And I'm like, "When do you want me?" They're like, "April." I'm like, "Sure." And so we literally put a show together in like 3 months, right? Like, I mean, it was again, like I was like, "Well, we're used to working like crazy people, so why not?" Right? So we built the show in Pittsburgh, and it was our first. It's not the full version of the show. It was our first time putting a lot of these elements together and testing them out. But the thing that happened was that we started having people emailing us and saying, "Hey, can we dress up to come see your show?" And we're like, "All right, sure." And so we actually went to the website. You can see it on our website being like, "Hey, the dress code is adventure or casual. Come as you are," right? Right?
Yeah.
And what people started coming in robes and ears and various items, right? And then over 3 weeks, it just kind of started snowballing, right? So like you'd have people in their full Ren Fair outfits, like full costume, right? You had this family came and they were the traveling party of the Lord of the Rings. So you had Gandalf as the dad and the tiny little children as hobbits and everybody in between. It was insane, right? The whole family, right? You had people in Star Trek uniforms who were there, right? You had people. I had this guy come in full chainmail and brought his sword. We were like, okay, well that's a step before, but okay. And then like someone dressed as like a Norse Viking, right? To the point that this family came and they weren't wearing costumes. They all showed up and they were just playing Magic the Gathering before the show started. I was like, that's a competing. Okay, fine. To the point where this couple shows up and they're wearing these gorgeous outfits, and I say, "Well, God, what are you guys wearing?" They're like, "Well, we had a Lord of the Rings themed wedding. I was Galadriel, he was Elrond. These are the clothes we were married in." I don't know. It's like in 22 years of working in live entertainment, no one has ever shown up in their wedding clothes to one of my shows. This has never happened before, right? And so it started saying, like, when I was raising money in January for this, right, I'd have investors being like, "Well, the D&D audience is not big enough." And I'm like, "You clearly don't know what you're talking about, but fine," right? But what happened is that our audience looks like it's the floor of Comic-Con. and that's the thing. It's like it reinforces that idea that this audience is hungry for live entertainment. We don't just go to movies.
That's what I was going to
right?
ask is, are you going to consider actually maybe having a production at Comic-Con for 2022 or in the future?
100%. 100. I mean, within the strategic plan for Toy Side Tavern is to be able to, go and put on, like, we have to build an efficient enough show to be able to do it, but go and put on and be the evening's entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And we will figure that out. So the next thing that we're doing is that we actually have to build the tentpole production. We have to build the thing. So we're working on that for the fall. But we're going to be at Edinburgh Fringe Festival this August with a smaller, a 70-minute version of the show.
Very cool.
Just to start getting it out there and testing it out and like doing Edinburgh. And Edinburgh, I don't know if you guys have ever been, but it's just like it's kind of an international gateway within live and experiential entertainment. And so I got everybody, all the major presenters chased us because I pitched them the show and they're like, "Here, please come." But I have a wonderful working relationship.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the contacts for Comic-Con South Africa, and you can just do whatever you want with them. And perhaps we'll be so lucky to have you over.
we got to figure out like we're still figuring out what I mean. We have a better sense of what the show is, right? But we built the show purposely to be flexible to do a lot of different types of things. So. Like truth be told, we've only been working on it for a year, right? So we're still figuring a few things out. But our audience is already giving us fan art. We started a Discord. People are joining that. And so back to the point they were making earlier, and this is the thing that Gamiotics power, right? Gamiotics allows it to be, which is being able to create an experience that builds community, right? Because of that agency that you have. Right. And that your fellow audience members have. And that's what Gamiotics is built to do, is be able to allow creators to build a community and agency and things within whatever it is that they want to do. And there's within the live entertainment spectrum, there's probably going to be lots of iterations of what the type of a Gamiotics shows can be. I love Toy Side Tavern. I'm the head of this company, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm building my Super Mario Brothers right now. I have much larger ambitions for where I want to see the software go around the world. Right. Cruise ships and theme parks and museums.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah. Look,
and really enter in this gamification conversation.
Yeah, it's almost so. What's interesting about the whole element of gamification is how originally it started off as a marketing term for to be like the really layman version of what gamification is. It's just spurring on audience interaction, right? But over time and the way the technology has changed, we have things like Twitch now, for example, which allows the layman to become almost like an overnight sensation and celebrity because of this interaction with an audience that, enjoys their content. Now, I know that what you're speaking of is obviously a little bit different to that, but it also feels really similar, but in a far more
grander
interactive way. Yeah. Like it can be applied to so much more.
So the Twitch thing is a great example, right? Because I love Twitch. It's lagged. It's not real time, and my software is real time. So there is a difference because I don't work very well with streaming entertainment, right? Yeah. And sure, I don't personally. I find that since my software works in real time, I want to have a real time conversation. But that's my roots in theater, of course, coming from, right? But Twitch is doing stuff like this, right? There are elements of that gamification now within Twitch in terms of how they're consumers, which is great because people are like, "Oh, is this competitive with Twitch?" I'm like, "Oh, Twitch is Twitch. Like Twitch is doing their own thing. They got this." What I am doing is saying I want to stay and be in the in-person arena because frankly, no one else is thinking about it. And I'm like, this is an even bigger audience, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge audience to do it. What I really am after, right, is rooted in those Seize the Show days. Is that what I really want Gamiotics and 27 Tavern to be able to do is this new idea of real-time broadcast entertainment where if we are in Vegas with 27 Tavern, you have 400 people in a room watching it, right? Then and they're having their experience that you can have 10,000 people around the world also having an experience, the at-home experience, all happening together in real time. And that reimagines what we think about broadcast is, right? That's what I'm really after, right? In terms of saying this
goal, essentially.
Because wouldn't you want to because again, we saw this during the pandemic. streaming is just not it, right?
Yeah, look,
Like,
streaming is
you're gonna live
one
stream
dimensional.
something.
You put it
It's
on, you
a
watch
one-way
it,
conversation.
you're finished. Yeah, like that was my example when I mentioned the whole Netflix thing. Is it's really just one way. You pick one option, and it's only ever one of two options. That's it. Whereas what you're currently doing, and that's something that I really like, is you're taking the video game experience and you're applying that to live audiences and giving them the sense of agency that you mentioned in order to have some sort of a impact on what's going on. And that is very rare because in today's day and age, a lot of things are just produced for you and you seldom have the ability to change what's going on. And I suppose that's one element of Twitch, which is what a lot of people enjoy, is that you're watching the stream live and you can donate whatever money or whatever the case is, and then they a speaker will go off or they'll be dunked with water or whatever the case is. But I like how yours is, it's not just facetious. Yours has more greater meaning to it because you have this actual story where people can be invested in it and then see what the outcome is going to be for this protagonist that they've now actively been involved in shaping the story.
Yeah,
that's the best part of it.
But it is truly a two-way conversation. It's a real-time two-way conversation. I mean, the founding of Twitch is an amazing story, right? Because it was that guy who strapped a video camera to him and filmed himself, and then people on the internet would then pay him to do stuff. I mean, it's a dark story, right? Yeah. But he built this technology platform that then became Twitch one day, right? Which was this two-way conversation. So I believe in that idea, and that two-way conversation idea. I'm saying it's a better conversation if it's real time. Absolutely, right? Right? And let's take it from a story position as opposed to a reaction position. That's what Twitch is. You're just reacting, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And also, you don't charge for Twitch, right? And I'm like, and as an entertainment producer, well, in some place, right?
Yeah.
But as an entertainment producer, what I'm after is building value into the experience. And what I do know after 22 years is, like, you tell a good story, you can charge the consumer for coming for your escapism, right?
Yeah.
Right. The best video game of all time in my books, right, is Last of Us, because it was the best story that I ever followed. Like Last of Us was an amazing storytelling experience. And that's what I'm after. So when I say to Gamiotics and saying, let's go to a museum, it's like, let's go to a museum and tell a story, right? As opposed to being fed something. And again, with consumers and modern consumers and the younger generations, I'm in my early 40s, they don't want to be fed anything. They want to have a say, right?
Yeah.
That's a big thing that I'm after, is like, God knows in America right now, it's like, I want to build things where audiences have a say.
Yeah.
Because I not to get political, but I feel like there is a need for it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The thing is, you want to give everyone, 1,000 people in one big theater, their own Last of Us, essentially. Yeah. And I think that's.
Oh, I mean, look.
It sounds super cool.
You bring up a very salient point now, because have you played Last of Us 2 as well?
Oh my God, I spent all last summer.
Okay,
that's what I did.
So that's fantastic. So Edward and I we dedicated almost an entire episode. I think it was the year before last, and we actually spoke about the emotional impact of what happened between Ellie and Abby and throughout the story. Anyway, the reason why I'm just speaking about that now is because the experience was so profound, just in the way that these characters were written, and how while you're playing the game, there are decisions you need to make which influenced the outcome. And to be able to have that experience, but shared, but shared. Yeah. Like I could imagine, yes, I could imagine doing this with like a group of friends, and we go and we're all now invested in these characters and we're pushing through. That is, I'm actually getting goose flesh. That's actually incredible. I'm
gonna do you one better. Right? So one of the things that the cohort system allows for, right? We haven't built an experience like this, but I'm definitely gunning for this, right? Is that because the cohort system, you can do multi-track experiences in a single environment, right? And that's a really cool thing. Right? What I'm after at some point is multi-track experiences in multiple environments, where you go with a group of friends, you each make a choice that sends you someplace else, and then you have to come back, and you've all had a different experience that you compare for. Because again, going back to Last of Us, right? One of the powerful things for me about Last of Us, especially in Last of Us 2, was I knew that anytime I killed a dog, it was going to come back and haunted me, and I still had to do it. And then you saw the other side of it. It was awful, right? Yeah, and it's one of the, but that's a challenge in a linear game design, right? Was you had to make that choice. You didn't have a choice but to make that choice, right? And then, but the brilliance of the storytelling was that it turned you around and said, this was the consequences of that choice that you had to make. What part of what we kind of experiment on Gamiotics is like, you get to make a choice. You don't have to make a choice, right? If it makes sense. Like, you have to make a choice, right? Yeah. But like, I'm not forcing you down a path, right? You know, that because that's producer-led narrative, right? We're really after giving as much agency to the audience in terms of narrative. Now, but that is a really hard thing to design for in live entertainment.
You see, because that's it. Yeah. Please do talk to us about that.
Thing. Yeah. All the time. Yeah. Right. I mean, because like, we want to set up choices. What we do is that we try and make our elections or our choices as balanced as possible, right? And then we have two things that are kind of competing, like the audience that night, what mood they're in, what their makeup is, how they're going to. So we have to try to present these choices so that it feels that we reinforce that this is a true choice. Because if you do a choice where 80% of the people do one thing and 20% do the other, you haven't actually created a real choice. Like everyone's like, well, this is the direction we're obviously going to go in. Like it happens sometimes, especially in comedy, where it's like, I'm always saying they're going to go for the joke. They're always going to go for the thing that think that's going to be the funniest, right? And then on top of that, especially coming out of the video game world, like we could do a whole other episode on this subject, but I'll go through it, which is like they have stakes. They have no real stakes, right? Well, fine. Let's set fire to the building. You're not actually setting fire to the theater that day. You're setting fire to the fictional story, right? So if you're presenting that choice of like, do we set a fire or not? The audience is going to be like, set the fire, right? Because they want to see the drama, right? Yeah. But you have to be careful in design in live entertainment about that concept. But then we know, and this is what we're going to spend the next, once we get our temple production up, is what happens when someone's seen the show multiple times. And the audience of people who've seen the show multiple times grows, you suddenly have a different series of voting going on or actions going on within the show. Because if you know how things are going to play out, you're going to be motivated just to try something else. Yeah. And this happened in Zoom chats, and we've seen it happen in our audiences already, of people standing in the lobby and being like, when this thing happens, do this, right? Because out of their own self-interest, they want to see the other pathway. From a design perspective, we have to design something that it's always going to feel jumbled up every time, that we really don't know what's going to happen. If we find ourselves in a pattern where it's like this thing happens the same way every single show, then we haven't designed it correctly. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's got to feel random every night. Yeah.
It's just a linear thing all over again.
Yeah. It's a linear thing all over again. So here's the best part about this. Who's doing this? Like, we're literally inventing this right now as we're going, like, and then making up as we're going on, because no one is out there doing this thing right now. But that's really exciting for us because we're teaching ourselves how to do this correctly while we're building, right? Yeah. And that's, for me, 22 years in live entertainment, everything I'm doing, like, this is the most excited I've ever been in my career. And, like, I produced on Broadway, right? Like, about creating something and working with this team and figuring out these really fun gaming problems, but in the live entertainment space. Right? It's fun. It's really fun. It's really rewarding. So,
it's very cool. I mean, I know we were speaking about like single player games, and now we're talking about live experiential experiences, but I kind of almost want more games to even take more of a page from what you're doing. So in other words, what I mean by that is a lot of first person or single player narratives are just that. They're kind of like watching a movie. Okay, sure, you might have choices along the way, but you play it, you go through it, you finish it. If you're so inclined, you can play it again. But, generally speaking, you often won't go back. What, in a way, the gaming world is actually missing at the moment, and I suppose this is where your technology could even come in, is almost like an online multiplayer version of an experience that is influenced in real time by audience participation. That doesn't exist yet either.
I'm hearing rumblings about this in the metaverse, right? Which I know very little about. But like,
it's the metaverse.
Yeah, I've had a friend who's approached me to say, I want to introduce this idea that you're doing into the metaverse stuff that I'm working on. And I'm like, sure, get it working first and tell me there's a consumer base and then we'll talk. Like, this is not like, I don't, it's like NFTs. I don't buy it yet. Like, I'm just not there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm saying, I don't, it's the same thing I keep saying about VR and AR. I'm like, you're putting pain points in front of consumers. You have to build something that makes me want, like you have to have the content that makes me want to buy the device, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, it goes back to the console gaming, right? Sony, PlayStation, you know, Nintendo. Like, I have a Switch because I had to play Breath of the Wild, right? Like, it had to happen, right? And that's why I bought a Switch. So we don't buy the hardware; we buy the content that the hardware supports, right?
See, I think that's why 20-sided tavern was such a big thing right from the get-go, because you tap into the correct market, and that's the tabletop, that's the D&D RPG market, and that's amazing. And yeah, NFTs, games, AR, VR, they're just not there yet.
Well, what I do find interesting is how video games technically right now share elements of everything that your company's doing, but just not in a single package. So what I mean by that is PlayStation has PlayLink, which allows certain video games to, you know, you're sitting with your family in the lounge, everybody can log in on their phone, and you have like it's a real-time back and forth communication between the server and the PlayStation and the answers that you have, so you can play like a game show, right? An interactive game show. Then on the other hand, we have games like the Dark Pictures Anthology, which have a myriad of choices that you can make throughout each playthrough, but then those are singular, so they're only for the one person playing. It's not a multi-platform thing. Sure, you can have people around you participating, but it's not quite the same thing. So what no one's actually done yet, and maybe this is somewhere in the future for Gamiotics as well, is to develop either a game or a platform where the actual audience plays live. So they are busy playing whatever game they're playing, and they make an actual influence on what's next for the future level, for example. I don't know how that would work exactly, but that is something I can tell you now already.
Well,
other than, look, I already want to watch your shows.
Yeah,
right? I really want to be part of them. So
that's the promise of the metaverse, right? I mean, like, and the metaverse is for Gamiotics is different than the live entertainment. So look, and again, I'm not anti-metaverse. It's just like, let's stop talking about it until it actually works. Like, right. You know, because I think the thing that you're hitting on is that you can't replace the and we learned this during the pandemic. You can't replace the value in the interaction between people, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in a live entertainment experience and you're having that collective reaction over the thing that's happening, it's wonderful. It's why we gather as humans, so that we can share a response together to what's happening, right? What I'm introducing is saying, why don't we also share choice, right?
Yeah.
Like, into this. Let's not get fed entertainment. Let's not get fed things anymore. Let's build experiences. And it's not to replace anything. It's to add to a bunch of stuff that we already love, right? Yes. And introducing technology into the mix as a platform to be able to develop these types of things. I mean, that is the promise of technology, right?
Yeah, it's essentially making your fellow human or your partner and whoever you're with the experience. They are part of it, and that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that idea. I really do love it.
It's fun. Look, I mean, we're on a fast march, and we got Edinburgh. So the idea right now is that with 20-Sided Tavern is that we do, and we're doing a week in New York just to test our Edinburgh. Oh, here's the other great thing. Again, remember, I am a commercial theater producer, so like you know, monetizing is a big part of what I do. Like, the fun part about this, right, is that this is the 4th campaign we've written in 6 months, right? Because that's what you do in the D&D world, is that you write new campaigns. So because everything we build at first is a template, story maps, gaming maps, projection map, right? Gamiotics is a platform, right? We can reskin everything we do every 6 months, right? So I put a show up. So the idea, the goal for that I have right now is that I want to do the show in Vegas, right? As our tentpole production, because Vegas is a perfect place for this idea, right? Before really getting into the touring market, and of course London as well, right? But that I can reskin the story. So it's always the 20-Sided Tavern, but then it's the story or the adventure of, right? And we put a new template on every 6 months, right? So you come back to Vegas, be like, let's go see 20-Sided Tavern again. We're going to go on a whole new story, and you will, right?
Yeah,
so that
awesome.
The product becomes perennial, and like, and again, it's like not only you get the same event, you don't get the same experience twice within a current story. It's like the story itself becomes within the replayability model, right?
You know,
incentive to return.
It's actually interesting that the way that you've mentioned the entire thing. I'm surprised that studios like Warner Brothers or Universal or Disney haven't already just snatched you up, because I can already imagine.
I'm too young.
No, because I can already imagine having these experiences at all of these theme parks. Go to Universal Studios and you have a brand new Terminator theater production where you actually take part in it, or the Warner Brothers studio in the UK, etc., etc.
Yeah, like instead of doing a parody of Harry Potter, you can actually do Harry Potter, And
no, thank you.
It's ideas are huge.
Good, I'm all full up on that's passive income for me now, and I want it to stay there. Like I'm good in that world.
Okay.
But I spent 3 years like fully inside the Potter world, right? And I love all of my Potter friends from that. But that was a long time to be in one brand, man. Like that was a lot for me.
But also the point I'm making is that they like license your technology, and then they create experiences using your tech. So obviously then it's royalties and so on and so forth, and then the experiential entertainment exists.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Look,
I'm all for everybody just adopting your tech now and licensing it and just doing stuff because I want it now.
It's just so new, right? It's just so new. No one else is doing this in the space. I keep saying it's coming. All I'm after right now is a first to market advantage on all fronts. Right? That's all that I'm going to do. Because you're right. At some point, someone's going to be like, I need to snatch this up. I need this inside, right? But that won't happen until I show how profitable the platform can make something, right? And so that's a big part of what 20-Sided Tavern's goal is that they serve each other, right? 20-Sided Tavern is its own right, like as a Super Mario Brothers can be, a very profitable experience, right? But for Gamiotics, it's what are there other verticals, what other experiences that we can build to? And the first thing I have to do is saying, hey, look, it worked over here, you can do it over here.
Yeah.
And I've spent a year saying that, and finally was just like, and this is just me as a human being, it's like, I'm tired of trying to sell people on this. I'm just going to show you. And so
that's exactly the right way of doing it. Yeah.
I got my commitment to my funding for Gamiotics in November, right? And I don't know anything about the startup world, but then that starts a journey, right? Which is like, oh, we got the money. No, you don't have the money. You have the promise of the money, but you don't have the money, right? And it's taken 6 months, right, to be able to figure out how to structure the deal, because it's a complicated deal, right? 6 months. And I knew it was going to take some. I didn't think it would take 6 months, but it's taken 6 months to structure that deal. So for me, in the meantime, I literally was like, let's go build something else, right? Well, because I can't sit and wait for this thing to happen. And then, of course, it was like, oh, it's reinforcing all these things we talked about gamification, but it's reinforcing this idea of Gamiotics. And that's when I had that realization, like, I'm tired of going to Warner Brothers and Disney and talking to people saying, hey, I've got a really great idea, and being like, well, maybe. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, fine, then, it's going to cost you more when you catch up with me. So
that's great. That's perfect. Yeah. Let them come later when you're like, when you're already like your IPO is available and you're like valued like $5 billion,
we can only hope, right? I mean, it's like, it's fun. I mean, like, it's, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, but so the thing about the seed funding is that the Gamiotics software right now, I'll have a release of the software in September-ish, right?
Oh,
that is then you could say, I would like to license your software and use it to build my own experience, right? And there's going to be an adoption process. Like I was saying earlier, what I was saying earlier is like, it's great that the software can be available for people to use to build their own things. What I've learned in the last year is to build the right products. It's like same thing as video gaming. Takes a lot of skill and expertise to build it right. So it's like, it's one thing to say, I'm going out and building my Super Mario Brothers. I'm building 20-Sided Tavern with a team of people that I trained for 2 years in how to do this, right? And with that overarching statement, do not make it a gimmick, make it a tool. Do not make it a gimmick, make it a tool. You're gimmickizing again. And we still, every once in a while, we'll find something, be like, oh, we made that a gimmick, right?
Yeah, that's actually so true.
That's a creative process. But again, it's like we have that knowledge. We're happy to share that knowledge for money down the road, but also it's going to take other people time to learn how to do it right as well, right?
Yes.
And so you look at the video game industry, Nintendo had a 10-year market window, right, where they owned that market and made billions of dollars before Sony and Microsoft figured out how to do it for themselves. And I would guarantee you, if you look back at those early games that Sony and Microsoft came out with, it was either with teams that came from Nintendo or they failed, because the institutional knowledge that you need to build this in the live experience marketplace is absolutely enormous, right?
Yeah. See, this is where you have the edge,
as
though,
an entrepreneur,
because you have the experience in. Yeah, right? That's exactly it.
Yeah. So it's just like, no sleep, and we got a new puppy this weekend, so I was like, oh Jesus.
Hashtag no sleep team. Yeah.
Well, listen, David, this has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. It's been awesome to hear about what Gamiotics is doing, where it's going to go, and with that in mind, I do hope that we can remain in touch so that you can let us know how things are going to be later on, so that perhaps maybe one day we can tune in, maybe via a Zoom production, or maybe if we find ourselves in America, we can go to one of these experiential events. And
I'm in South Africa.
Yeah. Or if you're here, that'll be great.
On that note, I was going to ask, the next show in Edinburgh, in the Place on Stone, is that going to be, I want to say, broadcasted at all, or is it just live only?
No, it's live only. This is a don't bite off more than you can chew situation, right? So we we have to be very measured in our goals, right? And we're not quite there yet. And I also don't want to do that live broadcasting until I get into the next version of the software, because there's a UX design issue. I mean, it works fine. It's working great right now. But like when I kind of get into that arena, there's more bells and whistles that I want and need that I just don't have yet. No.
Yeah.
But soon.
That's cool.
But soon.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But soon.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you very much, David, for taking the time to
it's like it's so fun to talk to fellow nerds who get what I'm like after. So like that's just like trust me, I talk to investors all the time who are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right." Like, so it's nice to we were talking earlier. It's nice to engage in a conversation where where I don't have to sit down and explain in detail how everything works. It's just like you understand.
We're already
what we're
sold
really
because
nice.
we already see the potential. We're kind of like, why is this not everywhere yet? Where can I get a ticket? Why can't I go to this? Like,
listen, the moment I read about 20-sided tavern, I was hooked.
Yeah,
I'm a D&D guy, so
it's No, I mean, like I've never had a show move this fast, right?
Yeah,
and one of the things that I've had several people like, oh, you really need to slow down. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, this is the speed of entertainment now. This is how fast we move things. Like, I'm not making, no mistakes we're making are crippling us. So, so it's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much. So for those of you who have tuned in and who listened to our previous episode and who have listened to this episode, if you enjoy what we do, please do like and subscribe. And from myself, Hans, from Edward, and from David, thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Ciao for now.